Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast. And now your host, EYAL Levy.
Welcome to the URM Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. It's crazy to think that we're now on our 5th year, but it's true. And it's only because of you, the listeners. And if you'd like to see us stick around for another 5 years, there are a few simple things that you can do that would really, really help us out. And I would be endlessly appreciative. Number 1, share our episodes with your friends. If you get something out of these episodes, I'm sure they will too. So please share us with your friends. Number 2, post our episodes on your Facebook and Instagram and tag me and our guests too. My Instagram is at EYAL Audio. And let me just let you know that we love seeing ourselves tagged in these posts. Who knows, we might even respond. And number 3, leave us reviews and 5 stars, please, anywhere you can. We especially love iTunes reviews. Once again, I want to thank you all for the years and years of loyalty. I just want you to know that we will never, ever charge you for this podcast, and I will always work as hard as possible to improve the episodes in every single way possible. All I ask in return is a share, post, and a tag. Now let's get on with it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the URM Podcast. I have a great episode for you today. His name is Mark Dodson, and he's a producer and engineer out of the UK. His career has spanned decades. He's worked with massive artists, including Judas Priest, Joe Cocker, Joan Jett, Suicidal Tendencies, Anthrax, and tons of others. I introduce you, Mark Dodson. All right, Mark Dodson, welcome to the URM Podcast.
Thank you.
How's lockdown treating you? I have to ask, I'm sorry.
Very interesting, yeah, of course. No, interesting, really. I quite enjoyed it to start with, to be honest. I was like, I treated it as a holiday, really. Just took time off. But actually, in a way, it was very beneficial too, because I was mixing a new album by Ugly Kid Joe, which I recorded in November in El Paso. We were going to mix it there, but
Sonic Ranch?
Yes. What a great place that is.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's a trip. Well, fantastic. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And Tony, the guy that owns it, is a lovely guy too.
Absolutely.
You know, and the equipment there is ridiculous. And being old school, it made me feel quite at home, you know. So we recorded it there, and the plan was to mix it in the same period of time, but it was just time-wise, it was impossible. So I brought it home, and I was quite grateful to have brought it home because it gave me a lot more time to mix it. And I mixed it using Logic, which isn't really, you know, that's not my history. So I had to learn Logic, basically, which, you know, I swore a lot at Logic during that time. You know, there's a lot of swearing going on and asking it why it thought it should be doing that, etc. But you know, eventually, you know, it worked out great. And I was happy with that. But lockdown suited that for me. You know, that was a real bonus. I'm great friends with a mastering engineer called Greg Calby, who to me is the greatest mastering engineer in the world. And it enabled me to send, because I wasn't sure of the sound of the room and the blah, 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 which is all important when you're mixing, obviously. I got to send my mixes to Greg, and he'd say, oh, this bit of it's a bit screwed, or that bit's a bit screwed. And so I then finally tuned what I was listening to, and I got a fix on what I was doing. And eventually all the mixes I'd send him a mix and he'd go, you got it now, you've got the frequencies, that's all great. So in answer to your question, yeah, I utilised that time quite well. I was quite happy that it happened, really. I'm not happy that it happened to everybody else.
Yeah, of course. That's what I've been saying too. When people ask me how it's going, I feel kind of guilty if I say that it's going well, because I know that there's so much suffering in the world.
Absolutely.
But that said, I feel like it's one of those things where if you're unfortunate enough to get it or have your work destroyed, it really, really sucks. But there's a group of people who aren't going to get it and whose jobs aren't going to go away. And those people have a choice whether or not they want to utilize the time or not.
Yeah.
And I think that there's no excuse. If you've got your health and you've still got work, then, and you're not using this time to do something good with it, then I don't know.
Well, it's a mistake, isn't it?
Maybe I'm a judgmental prick, but what are you doing?
You know, everybody gets situations thrown at them throughout life, in so many, many different ways. And if you don't take them and use them to your advantage, then you live in fear, and living in fear is no good. You've got to, it's hard because when you're a kid, you're 20 years old, you don't have fear. As you get older, you start to learn what fear might be. You worry about paying for this or paying for that, or how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? So when you're young and you have no fear, you do everything you want to do and you go gung-ho for it. And that's a great thing. And I always encourage my kids to think like that. And I try to convince myself that that's the way to carry on thinking forever. There's no point in not thinking like that. You've got to keep pushing for whatever it is your dream may be. And, dreams come and go, but I still have dreams about what I want to do with my life and what I want to achieve musically, as far as making records is concerned. And I'm still pushing to do it, So it's like you say, you've got to use it to your advantage. But that's not always easier said than done, obviously.
Well, yeah, definitely not always easier said than done. But I do think some people are pre-wired to be more fearless. But I don't think that if you're born as a fearful person that it's necessarily a prison sentence. You can choose to ignore it. I'm just out of curiosity, is that when you were, say, 20, like you brought up, was going for things totally second nature for you, just dream it and do it?
Absolutely, totally. Because I left school when I was 16. One day I went to school, and it's so different now, but one day I went to school and I always remember this. There were a bunch of kids at one end of the hall and another bunch at the other end of the hall. And I walked in and I said, what's going on? What's happening today? And somebody said, that bunch of kids are staying and that bunch of kids are leaving. And I was like, what, leaving school? They're like, yeah, okay. So I looked at the kids who were leaving. And
just leaving?
Yeah, just leaving like that. Like one next. And I looked at the bunch of kids and I liked the kids that were leaving. So I said, fuck it, I'll leave. And that was it. And I went home and said to my parents, I left school today. And they said, well, you better get a job then.
Where did they go?
We just all left school and went back. I went to work. You just stopped school and got a job.
Was that a normal thing or looked down on at all? Or I'll say something that I've noticed. This is like maybe 285 episodes in, and the amount of people that I've talked to who left high school, it's just amazing how many people have made music careers that dropped going to school. But at least here, there's a stigma associated with it. Like if you were to do it for a music career and then the music career didn't work out, it'd be rough business. Is it the same way in England?
Yeah. Nobody seemed to care one way or the other what I did. And I didn't consciously do it to start a music career. I just did it because I thought, well, they're leaving, I'm leaving. And I went off and did a couple of different jobs, before. But I was doing these jobs and I had the dream of working in a studio. That was like a dream to start work. And fortunately, I went to a studio one day and they said to me, I was just looking around, they said, oh, there's a studio opening up the road. And I went to the studio and it was in Battersea. It was a studio called Rampal. And it wasn't finished. It was half built. And I walked in there. I mean, this is crazy, really. I walked in there and there was a guy called Serrano. His name was Serrano, and another guy called John Wolfe. And I walked in there as just a kid, probably 20 years old. And they were like, I said, is there any jobs going? And they said, well, what can you do? And I said, I don't know. I can probably put tapes on a machine. And they chatted to me for about 10 minutes. They said, okay, well, when do you want to start? And I was like, well, I've got to quit my other job. When I was getting 26 quid a week at the other job, and they said, well, we'll give you £8 a week. And I was like, oh, okay, £8 a week. I said, fuck it, yeah, I'm coming. And that was it. And I left there and I went to work there, and it transpired, obviously, to be the best thing I ever did because it was the Who's recording studio.
Did you know that at the time?
No, I had no idea. Fortunate
move to pick that one.
Oh, totally. And when I went to work there, I was... At the same time, I was helping them build it, Well, they were still in the middle of building it. So I was kind of helping build. And then finally, I became an assistant engineer overnight. There was no protocol. It wasn't yet, there was no being a runner. I just became I was both really. I was a T-boy and an assistant engineer, general dog's body. And the first session that ever happened that I worked on there, I remember it was Princess Anne's wedding day and the pub stayed open late till midnight. And Joe Cocker was meant to be coming in to record. And he was meant to be there at 9 o'clock. So we're all sitting waiting for Joe Cocker. And at 12 o'clock, midnight, or just after, and this is gospel truth, a band came on the door and we opened the door and Joe Cocker just went flat on his face on the floor, like pissed as a fart, completely drunk.
Like through the door?
Yeah, literally. We opened the door and he just fell on the floor. And the guys picked him up and carried him into the control room and laid him down. And they set up all the instruments and started making music. And about 4 a.m, they had a backing track. And they woke him up. And they said, Joe, we got a backing track, and he's like, got himself together, went out and sung. And I was just completely gobsmacked. I mean, he was incredible. He had all the arms moving and all that shit that he used to do. And he sang incredible. And I was like, oh my God, this is the life. This is what it's all about.
So it's like the switch just got flipped on the moment you put him in the situation. Absolutely. That was the beginning of it for me, because that so many amazing bands and artists and people came through that studio. They did the film, they did all the music for Tommy there, they did Quadrophenia there, and then Thin Lizzy did all their records there, Motorhead, and I was working with Joan Jett doing Bad Reputation album, Ken Laguna producing it, and Richie Cordell, and I was doing Joan Jett and Judas Priest, whilst my buddy Will, who started at the same time as me, he was doing Thin Lizzy and Motorhead. So this studio had just like this huge, high quality caliber of artists coming. I mean, everybody was there at one time or another, literally, except for Mick Jagger. I think it's the only one that never came through there. But I saw everybody in there, everybody. Did you appreciate at the time what a crazy way to start that was? Or did it take till later for it to dawn on you that, holy shit, that's not a normal start? Absolutely. It wasn't till later that I was sitting there and, after working at other studios like A&M in Los Angeles, where they had runners, where you had to be a runner for a year before you earn the wings to become an assistant engineer. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, I just walked into the studio and there I was, rubbing shoulders with the likes of Pete Townsend, Keith Moon, Eric Clapton. Everybody came through that place. But it didn't faze me. That was the beauty of it all. I didn't get fazed by it because I was a cheeky little fucker anyway. And they treated me as such. I mean, there was a time when I went out into the studio and Pete Townsend was out there and he was just jamming on his acoustic with a guy from the rock pile, Dave Edmonds. From Rock Pile, they were both jamming, and they used to have a bar at the end of the studio where you could get a drink, and I was the tape operator, literally. And I went down and I got a drink, and as I was walking back, Pete and Dave Edmonds are jamming around on their acoustic guitars, and the guitars were open, cases were open on the floor. And I took 2p out of my pocket and threw it in Pete Townsend's guitar case. And he looked at me and he said, "You cheeky little cunt." He didn't fire me. Ballsy.
Yeah, it didn't fire me, so I think they kind of appreciated people that had a little bit of spunk about them, I was about to ask, since you didn't have any experience and basically just walked into this pretty high-level situation kind of off the street, how or why do you think they let you stay? I got on with them all. They were cruel to me. The people that worked at the studio, they didn't let you in easily. They were kind of cliquey. I kept pushing to do what I wanted to do. And I was, they didn't hate me. They didn't dislike me. They took the piss out of me and it's a start not to hate you. Yeah, exactly. And, I remember at one point they all befriended me and they were all talking to me and I thought, damn, they finally liked me. And they said, come and sit over here and we'll have a chat about this. And I was sitting there. And then, of course, a fucking big bucket of water fell on my head. They'd just been conning me and sitting there and thinking I was their friend. It was like an initiation process. But I got through it and they accepted it. And if I was out of line, they put me straight about certain things. So John Wolfe, who's the Who's road manager, was kind of quite a fearsome looking character. And if you did step out of line, he would tell you stepped out of line. But he didn't mind me. He quite liked me, and we got on all right. So I was lucky like that. I feel like that's probably the most important thing a young kid can possibly do is learn how to get along, because the skills part, I mean, you got to learn them both, but you can learn a skill. That's way, way easier. I've spoken to so many producers who say that when they're hiring an engineer or an intern,
They'd rather take somebody who knows zero but can hang out and is totally cool than someone who knows everything but is awkward to be around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's your job to try and make people feel comfortable and at ease with. And sometimes you've got to be invisible. And that's fine too. You've got to learn to be invisible as well. Just get on with what you've got to get on with and do it to the best of your ability. And the beauty of it was that a lot of different artists came through that studio. So I got to work with, obviously I worked with Glyn Johns and I worked with Ron Neverson and a guy called John Punter who did all Roxy Music stuff. And all these producers that came through one after the other of different bands. And I had to learn to be able to deal with them all and all their different personalities and all the band's different personalities. So it wasn't difficult to do. It was quite easy to slot in with everybody. And yet you had to be careful. I mean, Glyn Johns caught me one time and I was kind of saying, he caught me behind his back saying what a fussy fucker he was. And I didn't know he was hearing me. And he just said to me, all right, let's go outside. And I said, oh, shit. He's a big geezer. He's going to kick the fuck out of me. And I was like, oh, really? And then this guy Serrano stepped in. He said, no. He said, don't be like that, la, la, la. And we smoothed it out. And it was cool because Glyn Johns used to drop me off on the way home because he had a great big Cadillac with a number plate LP1. He was a flash fucker. And he used to drop me off at the end of my road on the way home because he lived on the way out where I lived. And we used to chat about music and stuff like that. So I learned my lesson, you keep your mouth shut. And if you're going to, like my mum said, if you haven't got something good to say about somebody, don't say anything at all. And that's when I realised she was right.
How long did it take before they were trusting you with actual audio stuff?
Well, I was immediately an assistant engineer, right? So that meant that I was obviously as a tape operator, whatever you want to call it. That was all the microphones set up, all the tapes and looking after all that, lining up the tape machines, keeping the machines clean, et cetera, and doing all that side of it.
Man, you had to learn that pretty fast, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, I learned it in a matter of days, pretty much. And then, because I was so keen, there were engineers coming in. There was one engineer called John Jansen, who was an American chap, great engineer. And I used to ask him so many questions. I mean, I wouldn't stop asking questions of all the engineers. Well, how did you do that? Why did you do that? Blah, blah, blah. So I got my head around it. And so I learned how everything worked. I wanted to know. And when you want to know something, it's easy to learn it if you want to learn it because you're possessed by it. And I was possessed with knowing how everything worked. It was all very well knowing how a desk worked, but actually making it sound good, that's a completely new story. That's completely different because you just don't know, So, but they were cool, the boys at the studio. They let you go in there when no one else was in there and just mess around with sound. We recorded ourselves. We made up songs. We messed around in the studio when it was empty. They let me bring in like the guys from the pub. I got them to come down and do some. And I learned by working on that stuff. And then eventually I became an engineer, which was, again, it probably took me about a year before I was actually entrusted to clients would come in and I would make records for them. And we were lucky because
that's fast.
It is fast. And I was lucky though, because there was, as I say, a lot of different people coming in and out. So the two engineers that we had used to get a bit tired. So we'd get a breaks for me and Will to try our skills out. A couple of Icelandic guys came to the studio to do some recording. And I was allotted the session. And I got on great with these guys. And I made the records for them. And eventually they flew me to Iceland to work on records as well. And we ended up doing a children's album. These guys are still making music in Iceland. And we finished off this children's album. And to this day, the children's album is still the biggest selling album ever in Iceland. So it was kind of cool, And we're still in touch as well. We still talk, which was amazing. So that helped me learn my trade. I think I was pretty shit at it. I don't think I was very good.
I mean, you might think you were shit, but did other people think so?
I don't think they did, fortunately, because
that's what matters.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know I'm a lot better than I was now, but, I still listen to that sort of thing now and again. It wasn't that terrible, it worked. It sold records, so kind of been that bad.
How long did it take from where you would consider yourself a working engineer to where heavy music started to become, I at least got on your radar or become like the focus?
I guess that was when I did, when Judas Priest came in and we did Sin After Sin, that album. And I was the engineer, and they had one guy came in to be a producer, and they weren't sure who the producer was going to be. Then he got fired. Roger Glover came in, but I kept the job as an engineer.
Were they big yet?
People were saying that they were about to break. Everybody said this album's going to break this band. So they were well known. They were well known, and they were just starting to bubble up quite big. And Simon Phillips came and played drums on that album, which even to this day, people go on about how amazing his drums were. That was the first heavy album I did, And of course, the art of getting heavy guitar sounds is an art in itself. And I don't think we really got the heaviest sounds in the world on the guitars at that time, but we captured what they were all about. And the album did all right. And people still talk about the album to this day. And that really began a friendship between myself and Glenn Tipton that has lasted 40 years, something like that. I don't know. We've been friends for like 45 years, something like that.
Just out of curiosity, I've always wondered about this. I know that heavy guitars especially sound very different now than they did then, but since I wasn't around for that, what I'm wondering is, was the feeling similar? Like even back then, even if relative to now, it's not the heaviest thing in the world. Back then, did it feel that way? Did it feel like you were making the heaviest guitar tone, the heaviest sounds?
It had a uniqueness about it. There's no doubt that it was very different from the way other people constructed their songs and the way that the guitars were played, because they were so almost percussive. So as opposed to maybe like a Joan Jett record where the guitars were more jangly and open and breathed more, it definitely had a different feel. And lyrically, it was more intense. So it was darker lyrically. The whole thing was a different genre from anything else that came through there. And regarding the guitar tones, obviously over the years, guitar tones evolved and got better and better. But the guitar players got better and better, and they also became more aware of what the fact that guitar sound was not just my responsibility, but initially and probably ultimately, the guitar sound is the guitar player's responsibility.
Yes, it sure is.
Well, it should be, really. But, we're always striving for, Glenn particularly was always striving for the heaviest sound, and we would always work on it. Even, when we did Defenders of the Faith and I did Glenn's solo album, he was still striving for this sound that I think was a little bit like a holy grail for him. I don't know if he ever really got it. But,
do you ever get it?
I don't know. It was weird because like Anthrax, when I did Anthrax, they just had a big fire in their warehouse and they'd lost a lot of equipment and they were concerned about the sound. But there was one cabinet and one amp that worked with Scott's rhythm set, that was Scott's rhythm sound. That amp and that cabinet, when you put them in and plugged them in and you put the microphones on it and you blended it a little bit, there was the sound. It was there. It was. We were fortunate that cabinet didn't get destroyed in the fire, basically, and that amp hadn't. So, and obviously the way he plays, you get 5 guitar players playing the same part, and it would sound different with every single one of them, just because of the way they play.
Yeah, it's. I've known that for a long time, but one of the times that I remember, it's one of those things that but you forget, I think, because you can go on tone quests and new gear is always sexy, but it always comes back to the guitar player. I remember like 10 or more years ago, my band was playing some shows with Slayer, and I remember Kerry King did the sound check. He's the only guy that showed up from his entire band for the sound check, so he just sound checked for 2 hours straight. And he just played 2 of their albums back to back, start to finish. And again, it was just his guitar, and it sounded identical to the records, like identical. Everything about it, from like the minor little fuck ups to like the little Kerry King-isms, it sounded just like him. And it was one of those moments where it was like, yeah, that's right. That's what it is. It's who the player is at the end of the day. So I'm sure that you could have plugged a bunch of people into Scott's rig and it wouldn't sound like Scott.
No, it certainly wouldn't. It just wouldn't, because of the way he played, the physical action of the way he played. And yet, oddly enough, Charlie wrote the riffs. It wasn't like Scott wrote the riffs. Charlie wrote the riffs.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then Scott interpreted them in the way that he played them. So between the two of them, and this is true of all music and bands, there's a catalytic magic that happens between the members of a band that create their sound. You know, it's not where you put the microphone. It could be a million different things, but it's the magic of a band that makes them sound the way they sound. So like Priest without Rob Halford is just a no-no. You know, it's just not. It doesn't matter if they got Tim Ripper or anybody else. It's just a no-no, because it's that magic combination.
Have you ever been producing a session where you helped a band figure out that magic combination of better if that person just writes it and that person plays it? Or have you noticed that most of the really incredible artists you've worked with had that figured out coming in?
I don't think anybody had it consciously figured out. I don't think anybody consciously knew. They just knew what they did, each one of them within the band. Mm-hmm. And oddly enough, it's happened to me on a lot of occasions where that magic, you set it all up and you're listening to the band and they're working on a song, and you might mess with the arrangement on certain songs, which I did on, different bands. Some bands you do, some bands you don't. Some bands you have to leave it till later to fuck with the arrangement, etc., etc. But the point I'm making is they could all be playing, and this goes from, I heard it with The Who, with Keith Moon drumming, to Suicidal Tendencies, to Bow Wow Wow, to Ugly Kid Joe, to whoever you like to mention. They'd be playing and it didn't sound right. And I'm going, and I'm struggling, trying to fix the sound, trying this, try that, try. And then all of a sudden, they played as a band and the magic happened and the sound physically changed when they hit that pocket, which is the pocket that a band has that makes them special. And you can't touch it. You can't contrive it. You don't, it's impossible to it's just a magic. With Suicidal, there was an occasion when we were getting nowhere one day, absolutely nowhere. And I said to the boys, come on, let's just go for a drive. We got out of the studio and we went somewhere and had a bit of fun for a few hours. And when we came back, we got 5 tracks just because their brains and I freed their minds up from the constrictions of the studio, and they came back and boom, 5 backing tracks in as long as it took to play the 5 backing tracks. And it was magical. So it's impossible to describe it. It's just like, but that's why I don't like working with a click, because the click inhibits that and stops that. And I'm like, no click at all. And that's, it's just the way I am. And it's like, it's been like that forever.
I actually think no click is making a comeback.
I think it has to come back. It has to. The Ugly Kid Joe album I just done has got no click. There was one song that Dave Fortman wrote on it, which he wrote at home, which we overdubbed onto, which was done to a click. But the rest of it's no click at all. And I'm like, they go, let's try a click. And I go, no, we're not fucking trying a click, right? No click. You're a drummer, you're a guitar player, you've got a pocket. That's make you what you are. You sing, you do this, you do that. When you're all together, you score a goal. Simple as that. And then they did.
I think that when people who came up with DAWs in the digital era realized that you can add a click after the fact, mm-hmm. I think that when that knowledge started to spread, I think that that's when the no click thing started to actually come back. Because I don't think anyone can make the argument against, I think, the fact, I know music's subjective, but I still think it's a fact that records felt better before clicks became, the norm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they just had a better ebb and flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you need to fix something within that ebb and flow, you can always, it's almost part of the fun, finding a way to make that work. To say, okay, well, how are we going to make that bit fit in there if that went like that and that went? I don't know. It's just something that I learned a lot from Tom Allen when we did Judas Priest together as well, and little ideas. And we used to fly stuff in on tapes. And I worked with a band called the Wild Hearts here in England, and we had, I can't remember the guitar player's name, he's dead now, but he played a solo on one of their demos, and they were like, oh, we want it on the final thing. And I was like, well, just start the song at the same tempo and we'll fix it. And we did it. And I got the solo from the demo, and I went, watch, and I put it on a tape machine, and I marked the tape, and I counted it in, and 1, 2, 3, hit the button, and popped it straight in, and it fell straight into the pocket. And they went, whoa, man, that's fucking amazing.
It is kind of amazing.
Yeah, it was magic, though. And I was like, well, it's meant to be then. It's happened. God's had something to do with that. That's the way I see it.
So I think that the big asterisk or requirement is that you need to be able to play and have a pocket to begin with. Yeah. So if you don't have that pocket that you're talking about, then there's nothing to save you. There's no parachute. But
no,
so I think that a lot of artists who don't have that, haven't worked to that point, have skipped lots of steps, and I'm not trying to talk shit about modern methods. I think everything's got its place.
Absolutely.
But everything also has a price, like we were talking about earlier about medication. I think the price of the modern methods is that sometimes you can skip steps and ditch some of the fundamentals, like playing with pocket, for instance.
Yeah. And I agree. I wouldn't. There's certain musics that obviously are all recorded to a click, and that's good for them. And if they're happy, then so be it. And I think that in those cases, the vocal is pretty much the one thing that gives it the character that helps it to become special in its own right. But you're 100% right, and I think that's. In life, you meet lots of different people that do different jobs, and there's not enough people that are conscientious about what they do. And a lot of them, that's because they do jobs that they hate. And the one thing that I noticed with 99% of musicians is that they're so proud and so happy to have that ability, and they're so keen to prove that they're the best, and they work so hard that they create that themselves. It's like you don't. It's like drummers want to be great. The bass player wants to be great. They really want to be as good as they possibly can. And so when you're in the studio working with them, they do their best work the majority of the time. Not all the time, obviously. But it's just nice that that you're working with people that they're giving every bit of their heart and soul to what they're doing. So that in itself makes it valid. And if you can make that work, then it's going to be good.
Is that kind of a common trait that you've noticed with all these, I'd call them mega artists you've worked with, that they all had that drive to be, I kind of compare it to Olympic athletes almost. It's like an insane kind of drive that it's unreasonable, but they have no choice about it. It's baked in.
Yeah. I think that's true. Well, drummers are such a good example of that because they're such weird personalities. Invariably, they
kind of have to be.
Yeah, they're almost like stand-up comics. They're kind of two different people a lot of the time. I think it's so interesting to watch people play off of great drummers. Really good. If you've got a good drummer, it ups everybody's game. It's like bringing on the star quarterback, It's like it just makes everybody play better, and that breeds through the rest of the band to create that little bit of magic. But yeah, it's a delight when it's like that, and invariably, Charlie Banani's killer drummer, fantastic drummer, and I've been lucky to work with lots of great drummers. Obviously, Simon Phillips was great with Judas Priest, and there was Ugly Kid Joe's drummer was a good drummer, and then they got Shannon Larkin in, who was a fucking great drummer as well. So I was lucky to work with lots of really good drummers, and that really helped. That helped, the drummer from Bow Wow Wow, a unique style. The first time he played a snare drum was on I Want Candy. He'd never played a snare drum before. And Ken Laguna, the producer, says, I want you to play a snare drum. And they're like, I don't play snare
drum. We don't do that.
Yeah, he only did tom-toms. He never even had a snare drum up until that moment when we did I Want Candy, which, was a magic moment. Again, a great band, fantastic pocket. So yeah, it's a very interesting conundrum because it's so untouchable. You can't tie it down. You can't go, well, that's wrong, because nothing's wrong. It can't be wrong. Almost like mistakes are good. I've always felt that. I always say to a band, if you're going to play, don't play like you're frightened. Play like you don't care if you fuck up. Because if you do fuck up, we'll do it again. Go for it. And it might be an amazing mistake. It might be one of them, like Rocky with Suicidal, played a guitar part. I said, you fucked that up there. You fucked that bit up there. And he went, oh, yeah, but I'll never fuck it up like that again, so let's keep it. And I'm like, cool, let's keep it. I'm happy with that.
I like that attitude. Speaking of I Want Candy and I guess songs that ended up making, I would say, a massive impact, did you know at the time that you were working with something special? Like, was there an air about it, or was it a surprise?
I didn't know. I knew the band were really good.
I guess you can't ever foresee that happening.
No, I don't think you can. I don't think I've ever made a record and gone, right, that's going to be a hit. Because I just never ever, I don't think of music like that. I might go, I like it, but I wouldn't. It's like, I didn't know Cats in the Cradle was going to be a huge hit. I just didn't know. And I knew that Lights, Camera, Revolution was a great record because I loved it. But I didn't know whether everybody else would love it. So I went in a pub in London just like 3 days ago, because the pubs are open here, which we're glad to see. There's a couple of blokes in there playing some heavy music. And they don't know who I am. They don't know what I've done in my life at all or anything about me. And I just got chatting to them about this, that, and the other. Never been a little bit, obtuse, if you like. And I just said, I love Suicidal Tendencies, actually. And I went to stay outside in the bar, outside to have a beer, and they came running out and they grabbed me and they brought me back in. And they were playing You Can't Bring Me Down in the pub. And I was like, wow, that rules, dude. And they were like, yeah. They didn't know that it had anything to do with it. And I said, now how fucking great is that? And they were like, yeah, it's pretty damn good. So I was happy, that sort of made me happy.
Do you get lots of moments like that?
Not as many as I'd like.
I think it's less common for producers than musicians.
Yeah.
You're reminding me of something that I remember Sean Connery saying about when they were doing Dr. No, that they thought it was going to fail and he thought it was going to fail.
Wow,
but he
really?
did it anyways. But then after it became the biggest thing on earth, everybody, except for him, started saying, oh, we knew it was going to be huge. And he just kept on saying in interviews, nobody knew it was going to be huge. Anyone that's saying that was lying. Everybody was totally scared and was taking a massive, massive risk, but thought it was cool. So they did it anyways.
And I think that's the best way to do something. If you like it and you love it and you just do it, you have no expectations of it, then everybody fears, don't they? Everybody has fear of one thing or another. The reason I worked with Suicidal was because the first time I ever heard them, I thought, these guys are fucking amazing. I just loved it. I wasn't like analysing the music. I just listened to the vibe of it all. And you
just dug it.
Yeah, it was just like, whoa, this is incredible. War inside my head. I was like, whoa, that's fucking incredible. And I was fortunate enough to work with them, to be honest, because they were one of the best bands I ever worked with. Mike Muir is an inspirational guy. Robert Trujillo, who, me and Robert are still best mates and still chat. And we've got a little project that we're working on the side called Mass Mental, which is very interesting as well.
He's done okay.
He's done great. He's a great
just
guy.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a lovely guy, Robert. He really is a great guy.
That's what everyone I know who knows him has said is I haven't heard anybody say anything even 0.5% negative about him.
He's amazing. He's an absolutely lovely guy. And me and him are we're just like best buddies. Every so often we catch up and we have a little chat because he's stuck in his quarantine in America, which I know is worse over there than it is over here at the moment.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, I know. I've been reading about it. I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't want to be in that situation. It's scary. But yeah, me and Robert, we get on great. And he introduced me to Amar Sabaleko, who's, I don't know if you know, Amar Sabaleko is a ridiculous jazz bass player. Well, him and Robert jam together all the time. And of course, Robert's son, Ty, who's a ridiculous bass player as well. I mean, he's ridiculous. He looks like Robert, just a miniature Robert. He's a ridiculous bass player, ridiculous. So Robert's introduced me to all those people. In fact, it was Robert that said to me, when we started the Mass Mental project, he said, we've got to find a singer. And Whit was kind of penciled in from Ugly Kid to do a bit, but and he did a bit, and he still does do a bit with those guys. But there was a guy called Benji Webb who's in a band they were called Dub War then, and now he's got a band called Skin Dread. Now, Benji comes from Wales. It's a black guy from Wales, and he's a fucking amazing singer. I don't know if you ever heard Skin Dread, but they are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's Benji. So he introduced me to Benji. He said, we just get him to come and sing on stuff. So funnily enough, Benji just sent me a text today and asked me if I'd do a couple of mixes for him, because he's been doing some Dub War stuff, and would I do a couple of mixes for him? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, Benji. So Robert's Robert's one of these guys that hears stuff and people and connections. So you get drummers like Brooks Wackerman. He introduced me to Brooks Wackerman and Josh Freese. All these. He's kind of a musician's musician and kind of a musical director as well. And I think that's why he works so well within Metallica. I mean, he's such a peacemaker, I think.
It sounded like they needed like a grounding influence.
Yeah, I think so. And he's definitely that. And I think he raises their level. I think he makes them better because he's so good.
That's another one of those stories where I don't think anyone could have predicted it.
Can you imagine? From carrying bricks around a building site to where he is now.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
That must have been surprising to hear about.
Yeah. Well, he was, after Suicidal, obviously, he went and joined Ozzy. Then he got that opportunity. And because when he walked in to play with Metallica, Rob's the kind of guy, he said, I knew every fucking song they had. Didn't matter what song they were going to ask me to play, I knew it. He said, and I knew it like that. And so they couldn't believe, not only does he look great, not only can he run around and got all the vibe and the persona and everything, but he plays like a crazy motherfucker as well. So he had every slap down, every little note down. He doesn't make mistakes, and if he does, they're good ones.
So it's interesting because he seems like such a humble dude, but no matter how humble or nice he is, he still went into it like a total killer.
Oh, yeah, totally. He was going to win that fight. There's no two ways about that. Robert's like that. Robert always wants to win. Robert's 100% music, 110% music. His whole soul is music. And on top of that, he's a lovely dude as well.
Do you think that winning kind of spirit is crucial for sticking around a long time?
I think the desire to want to give musically is essential to sticking around a long time. I don't know if you have to say, it's not like you're trying to beat anybody by winning. It's just that you want to be successful and always want to be coming up with something. It's like, I think Bowie was one of those guys that always said, they've got a time where Bowie wasn't happy with where he was anymore, and he wanted to be more than where he was, and always wanted to be more where he was. Whether that was a winning mentality or just an attitude about being a great musician. I think these guys are so wrapped up in what they do, and it becomes such an obsession with them. Someone like Mike Muir is a great example of somebody that's totally obsessed by his music and what he's saying and what he's doing. I mean, 100% pure and honest all the way through. Not necessarily always right, but 100% pure and honest. And that stands him in good stead. I don't know if he wants to win all the time, but I think he's the kind of guy that just wants people to stop and think about what he may be saying. So I'm not 100% sure about the have to win, but have to succeed, maybe, is the way of putting it.
That's a good distinction, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it's different too if you're trying to join somebody's band in an audition process versus being the David Bowie type where it is you are the main dude.
Yeah, I think with Robert as well that it's like to me, bands are like football teams, soccer teams, whatever. If you get the right player in, it changes the whole team. And getting Robert into that team, has given that team longevity and a reason to keep going as well, and taking them on from where they were. And also, I mean, Robert and Kirk do this little thing where they come out the front of the stage. Now, I don't know if you've seen them recently, where they play songs from the area or that are pertinent to the town or the city or the country that they're in, and they do a 15-minute skit with these songs. Now, Robert, he researches all that and goes away and finds. So if he might be playing in Prague or somewhere in Europe, Eastern Europe, and he'll go and find out what the local song is, the local thing that everybody loves, and he'll get a copy of it and he'll work it out, and then him and Kirk will work out how to play it together, and they give it a Metallica twist, and they'll come to the front of the stage, and they do that on purpose to get the audience into them and make them feel like they're part of it. Now, that was Robert's idea initially, and Metallica love it. It gives them a 15-minute break to sit around and do whatever they do for 15 minutes, wipe the sweat off because they're working hard. But it also gives the audience a much better feeling of participation. And I think that's quite inspirational on his part to have come up with that. He says it's quite difficult because they've got so many places that they're playing on a tour that you always have to be a step ahead. And him and Kirk are always in hotel rooms learning it the night before. So it's a bit like by the seat of your pants, but all good stuff.
It's amazing to hear that still at that level, they're not coasting.
Oh, no, definitely not. I think you can feel that, though, can't you, when you see them? You can feel that,
yes,
James
absolutely.
ain't coasting. You can tell they're not coasting. They want to do. It's like, last time I saw the Rolling Stones I think it was last year at Twickenham. And I swear to God, man, I just smiled for 3 hours. Mick Jagger is just beyond.
Oh, he doesn't coast at all. Holy shit. That guy's a force of nature.
Isn't he? He's so good. I mean, he's got better. He's like a wine. Better. He's just got better and better.
It's kind of ridiculous, actually.
It is. It's beyond. It's beyond.
It's like he's going in reverse, like aging in reverse or something.
Yeah. He's a lucky fucker. He's had a great life as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, quite the run for sure.
You're not kidding. And that's another thing. When there's a guy called Alexis Corner, an old blues singer, he found Rod Stewart and a few other people back in the day, and he was doing an old blues album down at Ramport back in the day, and he called Keith Richards up to come down and see if he'd play on it. And Keith Richards turned up, and I'm like, oh my God, Keith Richards, this is the shit. So Keith plugs his guitar in and Stevie Marriott turns up. I go, okay, so Stevie Marriott's there as well, and they're playing away, and they're both playing. And Stevie Marriott was, he said, I won't tell you what sort of mischief they were up to at the same time, but whilst in the middle of the mischief, Stevie Marriott was trying to persuade Keith Richards to leave the Rolling Stones and join Humble Pie. And Keith Richards was like, yeah, not bad idea, Steve. He's like, no, I ain't doing that. And then, I swear to God, about 2 weeks later, I think Stevie Marriott, God rest his soul, was obviously up on a bender, and it was like 4 a.m. We were about to leave the studio, and he calls out, he says, I'm coming down. He says, get the fucking stuff set up, I'm coming down. And we were like, we're just about to go, don't give me that shit, I'm coming down. And so one of the guys said to him, I tell you what, he says, call Pete Townsend, and if Pete Townsend calls us back in 10 minutes and says it's all right, we'll wait for you. Naturally, we never heard another word. So I don't think Stevie Marriott's going to be waking up Pete Townsend at 4 a.m.
So that's a good way to get out of it.
Yeah, it was well done. We were right there. Well done.
That was a crafty move.
Yeah, well, you didn't want to be sitting there till 7 a.m. Yeah.
I mean, you probably would have been if...
Oh, it'd have probably been till midday.
So speaking of the schedule, that's kind of an interesting thing. I was actually thinking about this yesterday, how I don't do crazy hours like that anymore like I used to. Do you still do that, or have you gone to a reasonable schedule?
Yeah, I've never really done that anyway, very, very rarely, because the reason that people do that is because they're high.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's why they do it.
That is kind of what it was.
And then everything is great. Everything's fucking great. And it's like, well, actually, it's not. It's not great. I've always been one to be like, wrap it. If something's amazing is happening, I'll keep going. If it's a band situation where we're trying to get tracks down, you know that there comes a time where you're not going to get any more backing tracks, no matter how hard you try. And you know that if you come back at 11 tomorrow morning, you'll get that backing track first take. And invariably, that's what happens. So, I would not work crazy. I like to start about midday and work through, maybe have a bit of dinner, come back from dinner and do something a little bit more, get a little bit of inspiration going, have a beer or two. Not get bladdered, obviously, because you can't do anything when you're bladdered. Just have maybe a beer, just to relax and see if you come up with a new idea here or there. And then midnight, call it a day.
I feel like when you're younger, it's a lot easier to get carried away with that kind of stuff. Is it something where you naturally kind of knew how to put on the brakes, or is this something you had to learn as you got on?
I had to learn because, there was a lot of that around back in the day, a lot of it. And I'm sure there is still to this day, but
Not as much, I don't think.
yeah, I think you're probably right about that. There was a lot about with different bands, most of the bands, and invariably, well, I don't really remember much great coming out of it. Occasionally someone could smoke a joint and come out with something great, but if someone's putting half a pound of blow up their nose, the chances are it's going to be a nightmare. And everybody thinks it's great, and you're going, oh, I wish I wasn't here. I don't want to be here. So I kind of learned that early on at Rampart, because there was one of the guys there, he learned how to make speed. He worked at the studio. He got banged up, put in prison for it in the end. Did 8 years, but he was we called him Boffin. He was a very, very clever bloke. And he worked out how, he was the guy that was in charge of all the lights and everything and the electrics and that. And there was one little button on the desk and it just said, silly button. And people used to say, what's that? And we say, don't push that button. Just don't push that button. And of course, everybody fucking pushed it. And when they pushed it, no matter what was playing or what was going on, the lights just went off. All the lights went psychedelic, and all like 16 big fuck off JBLs all around the room went into like a war mode. It was like, wow, this noise would just go crazy. And we would all sit there. Sometimes we'd do it when someone was taking their first line of Charlie. They go, what does Charlie do? We say, oh, take a line. They'd do a line and someone would push the silly button. And when the lights all stopped and it came back to normal, we'd all be sitting there as if nothing had happened. And the guy go, fuck yeah, no. We go, what? What's that?
Was the silly button a high idea?
No, he didn't do it. I don't think he did drugs, that guy. It was the weirdest thing.
So he just made them?
He made this speed that was so strong that it was ridiculous. He eventually got caught. He was making it in Scotland and the cops got him and they banged him up for 8 years. I don't know what happened to him. I think he became a computer genius after that, but it was a funny time.
So actually an entrepreneur or something like that.
Yeah. Strange.
So he just figured out how to make drugs, but didn't take them. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's how he worked it out.
It says for the love of science, right?
Yeah, he was definitely a boffin. And he used to wear a dog collar all the time as well. So he was a very trippy dude.
Sounds like it. My theory as to why it was more prevalent then is just because budgets are different now, and people, especially on the label side or management side, or even musician to musician, producers feel this way too. They just are assuming a lot more risk. They're basically not getting paid to deal with this kind of stuff anymore. So they don't put up with it. And I think back then they probably put up with it more because there was more money to put up with it. That's my theory, though. I don't know if I'm right.
No, you may well be right. I mean, obviously, when a band got signed and they got loads of money going in their pockets, all of a sudden they thought they'd arrived, and I was always of the mind that getting a record deal just meant the door just opened.
It's time to start working.
Exactly. Not time to start thinking you're a rock star. So anybody that had that kind of rock star mentality, and then there were a couple of bands that I worked with where that was the mentality, and it never ended well. It never ended well.
Did you ever have a moment where you were like, whoa, I've made it? Or you still feel like you're trying to make it?
I think that some of the stuff I've done is good and people get it, and it's helped people, and it's made a difference to some people's lives, which I'm eternally grateful for. But I don't think I'm finished yet. I still think there's something that I haven't done yet, and I'm working hard to try and work out what that is in today's world of music, because it is different now. And as you so rightly say, the budgets aren't there, this isn't there. Whether, I haven't seen a young band, and I'm sure they're out there, that are as good as the Suicidals or the overall package isn't as good as the Anthrax or this, that, or a band that I just look at and go, oh my God, these guys are fucking amazing. These guys have definitely got it, and wanted to work with them. And because I would work with any band if I believed that. And I wouldn't be like, right, you've got to pay me. I'd be like, we'll work some deal out. If this happens, then it happens. But let's make records for making records' sake. And I still feel that I haven't, maybe I have reached my pinnacle, but I'm hoping that I haven't, you know. I'm hoping I've been on a plateau, but I need to get to the pinnacle still. I haven't given up on that dream.
Well, I mean, the first thing you talked about was learning how to use Logic. I think the fact that you're still willing to learn new things says it all. In my opinion, that's kind of the difference between people who just stagnate and people who keep on getting better. Is it's kind of in opposition to itself to feel like you've arrived and then also keep trying to get better. It's like you can't ever feel satisfied if you want to keep on getting better.
No, you can't.
It doesn't work together.
No, it doesn't. I mean, there's times I hear bits of music that I've done, like I said, when I heard You Can't Bring Me Down in the pub. And I was like, wow. And I remember, funnily enough, my brother lives in California, and I don't know that he 100% knows what I do or don't. I mean, he knows I make records and stuff, but I just one day I was there and we were having a barbecue or whatever, and I put it on. I put You Can't Bring Me Down on. And I saw him stop and start listening to it. And he went, "Did you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh, fucking hell." And I was like, "You get it."
Oh,
right?
you do this for real.
Yeah. He didn't. He's like, "Oh, you're actually not just my little brother. You're all right."
Only took this long to figure it out.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that mad? So I'm still looking for the Holy Grail, just like Mike Muir is.
Have you always felt that way?
Yes.
So it never goes away.
No. I'm always yearning to do. I think you have to be like that.
I agree.
Otherwise, you're not going to get any better, are you? You've got to learn from people all the time. And I'm more than pleased to listen to what other people come up with. I'm not so arrogant as to say, "Well, you do it my way or no way," because that's like stupid. But all along I've learned from different people. I did a record with a band called the Electric Love Hogs, an LA band, and Tommy Lee came in and co-produced a couple of songs with me. Good lad, Tommy. Good drummer, good bloke all round. But I learned stuff off of him from sound point of view, you know, techniques of miking and stuff like that I'd never known before. I learned off of Tom Allen, some great stuff as well. And obviously, when I first started, you know, Glyn Johns was the leading record producer in the world, working with Zeppelin, The Who, The Stones, whatever. And he used to put 3 microphones on the drums. That was it. 3 microphones. That was it. And I was like, I hadn't seen that before. So he had 1 on the bass drum and 2 overheads, which were the positioning of which was critical. So that was his sound. And that was, so people go, "Oh, I want my drums to sound like John Bonham." And I'm like, "Well, we're going to put 3 microphones on them. You play like John Bonham and you'll fucking sound like John Bonham." That's the bottom line.
Yeah, that's kind of the tough part.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah.
And I remember at one point where Keith Moon had, I swear to God, he must have had 15 tom-toms up on this big stand. And Pete Townsend said to Glyn, he said, "Glyn, can we just put a microphone on the snare drum?" And Glyn says, "No, I don't do that." He goes, "Please, can we just put a microphone?" Eventually he got his own way. And that's the only time I ever saw Glyn Johns put a microphone on a snare drum.
So speaking of the Glyn Johns technique, like you said, it's super simple and kind of comes down to the drummer. Is that basically the point of it? Like, capture this great musician, and if the great musician isn't a great musician, then it's not going to work.
Exactly. It's not going to sound good.
It's designed to basically capture greatness.
Absolutely. So the way that Mooney would hit the drums, or Ginger Baker would hit the drums, or any of those guys, you could listen to those guys. I walked into a club in Los Angeles and there was some drums being played way in the back. I could just hear it and I thought, that sounds like Ginger Baker. And it was Ginger Baker. And I just knew it because of my love of Cream.
Like that Kerry King story I told you about.
Yeah. Precisely. Exactly. So, yeah, it's the way that they hit the drums that makes them sound the way they sound. It's just as simple as that, you know, and that's so unique and so special to each, and that's true of each musician within the band. It's a unique how the singer phrases his vocal, where his pocket is within the vocals. And I worked with the band in, I can't remember their name, and it didn't really matter. I was just the engineer on it, and it was a band in Toronto, and the producer was a record company guy, A&R guy, and he kept trying to make the band. He said, "I want you to play behind the beat. I want you to play behind the beat." And I was like doing lots of different kinds of stuff at that time musically. And I sat there as engineered it, and I'm like, why are you trying to make them play behind the beat? I want them to sound like Led Zeppelin. And I'm like, but this band is this band. They can't be Led Zeppelin. And he would stop them in mid-take and make them slow down or try and drop a bit in and drop a bit in and drop a bit in. And I'm like, oh my God. And I think I got fired off the project because he knew my dislike for the whole process, really, and my disinterested, because it made no sense to me. I'm like, this is shit. I can't do this. This is not right. This is not how you make a record. If you don't let the band breathe and be themselves, where are they ever going to go? They don't know who they are.
There is nowhere to go.
Exactly.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying this podcast, then you should know that it's brought to you by URM Academy. URM Academy's mission is to create the next generation of audio professionals by giving them the inspiration and information to hone their craft and build a career doing what they love. You've probably heard me talk about Nail the Mix before, and if you're a member, you already know how amazing it is. At the beginning of the month, Nail the Mix members get the raw multi-tracks to a new song by artists like Lamb of God, Angels and Airwaves, Knock Loose, Opeth, Meshuggah, Bring Me the Horizon, Gojira, Asking Alexandria, Machine Head, and Papa Roach, among many, many others. Over 60 at this point. Then at the end of the month, the producer who mixed it comes on and does a live streaming walkthrough of exactly how they mixed the song on the album and takes your questions live on air. And these are guys like TLA, Will Putney, Jens Bogren, Dan Lancaster, Tui Madsen, Andrew Wade, and many, many more. You'll also get access to MixLab, which is our collection of dozens of bite-sized mixing tutorials that cover all the basics, as well as Portfolio Builder, which is a library of pro-quality multi-tracks cleared for use in your portfolio, so your career will never again be held back by the quality of your source material. And for those of you who really want to step up their game, we have another membership tier called URM Enhance, which includes everything I already told you about and access to our massive library of fast tracks, which are deep, super detailed courses on intermediate and advanced topics like gain staging, mastering, low end, and so forth. It's over 500 hours of content, and man, let me tell you, this stuff is just insanely detailed. Enhanced members also get access to one-on-ones, which are basically office hour sessions with us, and Mix Rescue, which is where we open up one of your mixes and fix it up and talk you through exactly what we're doing at every step. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, if you're ready to level up your mixing skills in your audio career, head over to urm.academy to find out more. You made me think of Glyn Johns in a way that I haven't thought of it before, but can we talk about it for a second?
Of course.
Because what I think is really interesting is a lot of people think about miking techniques as a technical thing, like distances and angles and all that. And that's obviously a part of it, of course. But the way you're talking about it is it's an artistic choice. And so if I think about other miking techniques like say space pairs or something, or the way that metal producers will basically do a series of close mics and no real overheads, I guess. It's designed more to hide the picture of the kit so that you can get a very specific, precise sound, where it sounds like the artistic approach for Glyn Johns is the opposite of that. It takes something great and then showcase it.
Yeah. And if the drummer didn't play good, it wasn't going to be good. That's the end of the story.
No angles or measurements would fix that.
No, I mean the only thing the positioning of the two microphones, which would have been Neumann 87s over the kit, was critical in as much as they were equidistant from the snare drum. But and of course that could affect things in a drastic way. If it could end up picking up one cymbal so much that it was obnoxious, and it shouldn't be like that. But he managed to get away with it, and sometimes on some records you can hear that. Occasionally you get to hear that, but I don't mind that either. I kind of like that because it's not quite right. I like things that aren't quite right sometimes. Most people that listen to records would never hear it because they don't listen to a record like I listen to a record. I try not to listen to records like that, but if something's obviously a bit weird, like a cymbal is obviously ridiculously loud. Like on Can't Find My Way Home by Blind Faith, there's a cymbal on there, Ginger Baker cymbal. It's so loud. But I love it, it's just ridiculous, but I love it. I don't know if Glyn Johns did that record, mind you. I think that there's a lot of people make a lot out of mic position. If the mic, it's like you can overdo it. It's really difficult to say because sometimes you just get lucky. You just happen to, like with a guitar, you press the bet, it's probably, in my mind, is a Sennheiser and an 87, and you find the best speaker in the cone, within all the speakers, and you mic that one's speaker, and you move the microphones a little bit to get a bit more top or a bit more bottom, and that's it. Then it's down to the guitar player to make it sound good, to my mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I guess the part that's not luck is knowing when you got lucky and not changing it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. You just get, sometimes you just get a lucky sound and you think, oh my God, that's a fucking great sound, and you keep it forever. You don't know it's going to happen. It just happens. And Tom Allen, who produced Priest stuff, was a great advocate of that and a great at doing that. Very off the wall kind of dude, very English, but would always come up with great sounding things, as did Visconti with Bowie. Little techniques for microphone. I read one thing about that he did with Bowie that I was like, fucking, that's a good idea. And so he's got Bowie there singing into this one microphone, and he's got another microphone down the hall, maybe 20 yards away or something like that in the studio. But that microphone, the faraway one, was set so that it only opened up when Bowie hit a certain amount of volume. So it was done with what's called a keypex, which is a noise gate. And it was set so in a certain way so that it triggered that microphone to open, so that when he bellowed a note, the microphone created the different sounds. You didn't have to put an effect on it, that actual setup.
Clever.
Fantastic idea.
Yeah, I love that kind of innovative thinking.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is there ever a time or many times where you did get to that sound and you thought to yourself, I can get it even better, and you tried to make it even better and ruined it and could never get it back?
During the recording process, probably not. Maybe during the mixing process, I'd be like...
You're laughing, though, so you know what I'm talking about.
I'm laughing because, I totally know what you're talking about. I think that there may be some mixes where I've got a mix right and it's just like, oh, it's fantastic, and then try to recreate it and never ever get near it again, albeit there may be things that aren't quite right about it. Within the actual recording of something, probably not. I probably would get something sounding as well as it could sound, and then once it worked within the track, I would be accepting of it and keep it. And then if there was any improvement to be made during the mix, I could maybe find something that would make it, a bit better within the mix later on. It's weird because with Logic, during this Ugly Kid Joe record, I kind of fucked around with some repeat echoes, and I was trying to learn something, how I did this. And then this repeat echo happened, and I went, oh, fuck me, that's good. I was like, whoa, that's very good. And I kept it, and I was like, wow. And I enhanced it, and I made sure it sat just right in the mix, and it stayed there forever. Now, how I did that, I'll never know, to be honest. I mean, I could go back and analyse it within Logic, but I don't want to, because I haven't got the brain power to do it. I got it, and I thought, that's in the record, boom, done. It was a bit like Rocky's guitar era. It just happened.
Man, that's good instincts. And I wonder, is that something that you had to be taught, like when to back off, or is that something that just came naturally to you?
I think that's pretty much instinctive.
Because that's where a lot of people fuck themselves up.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was lucky because working with people like Laguna, I don't know if you know who Kenny Laguna is, but Kenny manages Joan Jett. Guitars
for Joan Jett?
Yeah, well, he's the manager and the producer and everything.
Okay.
And Kenny I didn't find Joan Jett. She was in the Runaways, obviously. And but he took her from the Runaways and turned her into what she is today. And he had another guy called Richie Cordell who worked with him and Richie Cordell wrote Moni Moni and I Think We're Alone Now, back in the days of Bubblegum. And Kenny was in Tommy James and the Shondells. Kenny played keyboards. And Kenny came to London and worked at Rampart Studios on lots of punk records. And me and Kenny became great buddies. And we worked together on lots of different things. And he was coming over there. He was on a bit of a wing and a prayer, just trying to get work and do as well as he could. And they finally found Joni, and The Who and Bill Kirbishley helped him with the studio. And Kenny was like But one thing, and Kenny was just a great personality and character, and him and Joni are like a legend, really. And but I remember him being in a studio one time, and the studio manager came running in and was like, what do you think? What do you think? I think it's a fucking great studio. And Kenny just looked at me and said, well, I haven't seen God today. Meaning that nothing special happened. You know what I mean? God's not here today. So, Kenny was like that. He was like, special moments would happen and Kenny would jump on and go, that's a fucking great idea. That's a brilliant idea, And
But he wouldn't be impressed by superficial things like.
Oh, absolutely
like
not.
It's a cool studio.
No, he didn't care about that. He knew when the music was right. Again, another person that integrity was all important.
I feel like you can't fake that.
No.
And you were talking about in the pre-interview about how Kenny was instrumental in you getting out on your own as a producer. Can you talk a little bit about your work with him and how that led you down your own path?
Well, yeah, because Kenny had a friend called Steve Leeds who was something to do with MTV and worked for MCA Records as well. And Steve was looking for a producer for a band called the Iron City House Rockers. And, and Kenny put my name forward on that project, which was very kind of him to do so. And he actually came and played piano on it as well. And I got the job and I went off and I made the record with lead singer was a guy called Joe Krashecki, another great guy, good friends with Bruce Springsteen, funnily enough. He actually introduced me to Bruce Springsteen, which I'm eternally grateful for. Just to say hello to Bruce Springsteen was, And that was funny because we were in a big studio in New York and we were talking to Bruce Springsteen and these guys are running around with microphones and all these different amps and all that. And Bruce just turned and said, I wish they'd just fucking plug me in and let me play. And that made total sense to me. Kenny was great for me in that respect. And he brought me on, he let me engineer all these records with him. It's a guy called Steve Gibbons in this country who had a few hits. And of course, Joan Jett, Bad Reputation album was, very special for me as well to be able to do that record. So, I'm eternally grateful to Kenny. And he's a great producer. He's got a great ear. He can sing harmonies all day long. He can come up with all these different harmony background vocal parts because he loved the Beach Boys and all that stuff. So he's great at all that sort of thing. He's a great songwriter, songsmith, just an all-round good music person. Very, very good at what he did. So I learned a lot from Kenny, a lot.
Why do you think he gravitated towards you? Like, what was it about your relationship that...
I don't know. Again, we just hit it off. When I was just...
You just hit it off?
Yeah, we got on well, and I hopefully made his life easier and better. And because I worked at the Who studio, which was also like helping him to be able to afford to record Joan Jett at that time, because I didn't have a deal. I was lucky enough to be there and to be the engineer, and we became friends. Just straight off became friends. And I even I flew to New York at one point with my wife, and they put us up and looked after us and treated us like lords, and I became friends with his wife as well. We all became friends, and we still are to this day, which is lovely too. And I really appreciate what he did for me, because you need a leg up sometimes, you need someone to give you a break. And he did give me a break that helped me a lot, because that gave me the confidence to believe that I could produce a record. And albeit that I used techniques that I'd learned from all these other producers that I worked with on that particular album, it gave me a chance. And then obviously I led on to things like being in America, which I was totally starstruck by. Being in America, I was like a kid in a cookie shop. I was like, everything was so incredible. And it still is pretty much to me. I mean, I love the place. But then it gave me the confidence to be able to go, when I got the opportunity to produce Metal Church, I had the confidence to do it, albeit that I remember being in New York talking to Michael Alago, the A&R guy, and I think I had my bus fare, I had my cab fare to the airport to get home. I was looking for work, literally. I had enough money to get to the airport to get home, and I had $70 to take him out to lunch. That's all I had in the world. And I was praying that lunch wasn't going to be more than $70.
Not $71.50.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, I had to walk to the airport. And I got just scraped in there, just scraped in. But that was good. And then me and Kenny went and worked, of course, with all the Berserkly artists as well. I don't know, Greg Kinn, the Rubinoos, which was Matthew Kaufman had a label called Berserkly Records down in Berkeley, California. And Matthew Kaufman was around, like Jonathan Richman had a few hits in England, and Matthew would come to England and do some recording, and then we would go over there and record, and Kenny took me along with him. So I got the opportunity to work with all these other bands, and there was some great bands as well. So he really opened a lot of doors for me and gave me a lot of opportunities.
Man, it really comes down to your relationships, doesn't it?
I think so, because people either don't like you or they do like you, don't they?
Yeah, and I feel like if they don't like you, they'll only work with you until a suitable replacement that they do like materializes. Like, I know there's some mixers who people don't like as people, but they make so much money for so many people. They do such a great job that people will tolerate them. But the moment somebody comes around that's just as good, who's actually cool to hang out with, they'll abandon ship. I've seen it happen many times.
I can imagine that would be the case. And the thing about good friendships is as well that they last forever. Glenn Tipton from Priest, as I say, we still talk all the time. And he gave me, obviously, Sin After Sin. I was still learning my craft at that time, as I am now, to be honest. But then he came and said, "Come and do Defenders of the Faith with us." And I was like, "I'd love to." But he'd remembered me and he wanted me to come back because he liked me and I liked him. And we've as I say, we've been great friends ever since. And people do, I'm sure people, they forget you if they don't like you. That's what really happens, I think. People just wipe you out of their minds and they move on, which is fine.
I mean, you can't win them all, can you?
No, I don't think you can win them all. And rightly so, you shouldn't. And if you fuck up, you need to learn why you fucked up as well, and understand what might not be your fault. But if it is your fault, you've got to take it on the chin and fix it.
Absolutely. I was also thinking about this the other day, that when I first got into the industry, the advice from people that were more experienced than me was always make friends with anybody, burn zero bridges. And I understand what they're saying, and I do agree with that to some degree, but I also think that that's kind of unrealistic because you're not going to get along with everybody, and you are going to burn some bridges at some point, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
I don't know a single person who has stuck around who hasn't had at least one problem with one person. And I think that
absolutely
the real trick is to be able to navigate it when that happens and not let that affect everything else. Or if something bad happens, to figure out exactly how to bounce back from it, but not to expect that nothing bad will ever happen or that you just magically won't piss people off, because sometimes this industry is like navigating a minefield. So there are some situations I've noticed that are almost designed to blow up in your face, and not because there's any malintent, but just because there's so many competing interests, so many egos. There's no way for someone not to get pissed off. It's just impossible. You can't always please people.
No, you can't. And I think there's been times where I think I don't understand why I don't get on with that guy or that guy. I don't speak to that guy or that person anymore. And I think that sometimes it's a case of Chinese whispers and misunderstandings as well. And there are cases where I've worked with people that I would never want to work with again.
Yeah, of course.
Well, unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that their music reflects their personality in my mind, and therefore I don't like either of them. And I don't mean that nastily with any, I don't wish them any ill whatsoever, but I just wouldn't be able to work. I wouldn't physically be able to work with a couple of people who spring to mind immediately ever again, and I wouldn't want to. I'd rather be destitute.
Yeah, I mean, there's some situations that are just not compatible. But I think it's good. It's good to recognize that, though.
God, yeah. And if they're lucky or if they're successful and off they go and be successful, I'm like, great, be good for you, mate. I'm glad you're successful. Not that I've ever noticed it lasts very long with those people.
Well, you never know, though. I'll just say that that's something that I had to grow up a little to start understanding, that sometimes scenarios where I don't like somebody or don't want to work with somebody isn't because they're a bad person or anything. Sometimes you're just incompatible. with certain people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you can't be compatible with everybody.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And I've been lucky like that because when I got started, I needed management, and I flew to America and tried to get management to forward my career. And it was a godsend that I met Doreen and Hernando Courtwright, who were both in the music industry at that time. I think Doreen's now into real estate, and they became like my big brother and sister. They were just absolutely adorable people. Doreen particularly, we just got on great. And she had Tony Visconti, Max Norman, Eddie Kramer, and all these guys, and then I went there and just talked to her, and she said, "Yeah, we'll work with you." And I was like, "Really?" She was like, "Yeah." I was so made up. I think I'd done Metal Church at that time. So there was stuff, and it was her that got me Anthrax. So, because I went to Germany to work with Accept, a band called Accept, a German band.
Mm-hmm.
And then I mixed an album for them. And then I went on to do a couple of albums with Udo, the singer, which was a bit of a trip. Funny times, but all good, being in Germany. And somehow or other, Johnny Z liked those records, and it was him that he knew Doreen, and I got to work with Anthrax, and Doreen helped push through a lot of deals, Suicidal thing, stuff like that. So Doreen, and Ugly Kid Joe, of course, which was, probably the biggest selling record I've ever done. Again, it was her connections and her friends and the people that she knew, and we just had this great rapport that went on. And it was so great because when I flew to do the first Ugly Kid Joe record, I got there. There were two A&R guys, a guy called Bob Scorrow and another guy called Bobby Carlton. And Bobby Carlton, bless his socks, is a beautiful guy. And I got there and I went to this hotel before I met the boys. I'd already met them once when I was mixing an album in LA, and we'd had a chat. And apparently I passed the trick question. There was a trick question.
Do you know what it is now?
I think it was something to do with Sin After Sin, and I'm not quite sure. I kind of said, they said, "Oh, no," and I said, "Yeah, but it's a pretty shitty sounding record." And I think that was the trick question, but I'm not sure. And you got to love Whit Crane for all that stuff, because he comes up with that stuff all the time. Crazy bugger. And I got to the hotel, and there was a big bag, like a big refuse sack behind the counter, and the guy said, "Oh, someone's left this here for you," and it's from the A&R department, Mercury Records, and it said on it, "This is all the outboard gear you will need for this record." And I opened it, and it was like pairs of flip-flops, shorts, beach balls, just stuff you have on the beach. And I was like, "Oh, these guys are cool. We're going to have a good time." And when we did, we had the greatest time ever working with the Ugly Kids. So they were a delight to work with.
Sounds like there's been a few key characters in your career that have served as like keys, basically, that unlocked tons of stuff that came afterwards.
Yeah. It's strange because you don't realise. Like I did a couple of albums with a band called Prong, a New York band,
yep.
Prong, and Tommy the singer is a fantastic guy again, and I love working with those guys. They were great. And then one day I bumped into Rob Halford at a music convention or something somewhere, and he came up to me and he said, "Mark," he said, "I love that record you've done with Prong." He says, "Those riffs are fucking great, aren't they?" And I was like, "Wow, I didn't realise you'd even listen to it, Rob," But he had, and he really loved it. So that was great. That was all good. It was just good that he appreciated what I'd done with Prong.
Where did Mutt Lange come into the picture?
And the reason I got to know Mutt Lange was because he came to Rampart, the Who studio, and I don't know who he was working with even now, but he was producing this band. And what I learned from Mutt Lange was you record everything and then figure it out in the mix. That's what he did. He used to record everything and figure it out in the mix. I think this was in the early days of his career. And so he just recorded everything. And he was probably only at that studio
What do you mean by everything?
Well, any idea that anybody had, he would record it and say, okay. And even if he didn't think it was a great idea, he'd say, all right, it's not bad, let's move on with this. So everybody was happy. They got their ideas put on, recorded, but then he would move them around later and make it all work. I mean, he's predominantly a great songwriter and a great producer in his own right, without a shadow of a doubt. A bit mechanical for my liking, but nonetheless still very innovative and has done some fantastic work.
I have heard him referred to as Pro Tools before Pro Tools.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing him. Yeah, I would say, well, knowing what I know about the way that he recorded Def Leppard and how that worked, etc., and you think that totally would describe Mutt Lange in my mind because of the way that he would record guitars. Sometimes people said he would record notes at a time and put them together. So that's a great way of describing him. And I think that to be able to have done it with tape makes it even more profound.
It's insane to think about.
It really is, because the thing that was at that time was when I went off to do Defenders of the Faith, and they were all listening to Def Leppard, and because he had that big fat snare drum.
Oh yeah,
and they, and I was like, I wasn't, and I know now that obviously he sampled it in an AMS, and that's how it worked. But I didn't really know about AMSs at that time, and this this is a fucking great story. So we went to Florida, right? And we recorded everything, and we were overdubbing in Florida. And in this studio, there was a guy called Seth, and he had this thing. This is gospel truth. He had this strobe light that you could send a signal to, and it would make the strobe light flash, and the strobe light in turn would trigger this metal arm, and the arm would go like that. and me and Tom looked at each other and we went, wonder what would happen if we put a drumstick in that hand and put a snare drum underneath it and tuned it, what it would be like.
Well, making history right there.
And then we put a glove on the metal hand as well. We had to have a glove, heavy metal glove.
Yeah.
And it would trigger and it would hit the snare, and we mic the snare up so that we could take this extra snare sound and mix it in with the original drums. And that's exactly what we did. But it was incredibly laborious because if the snare drum...
What year was this?
Oh, God. Whatever year Defenders of the Faith was.
I'm looking it up.
I don't know what year that was.
I need to know what year.
Yeah. I can probably tell you. That's about 83, 84.
Because that's like, that sounds like, I mean, that is sampling before sampling.
Well, but I think sampling may have existed, to be honest. I wasn't very aware of it. That was probably my mistake for not knowing that you could actually do that with an AMS.
January 4th, 1984.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so you put a glove on it and you blended it in with the mix.
Yeah, but of course, if there was a snare fill, the metal arm couldn't keep up with it, It would just stop, and we had to go backwards and forwards. And I had to send a triggered signal to the light so that it didn't pick up more than it was meant to pick up from the original snare drum. So the signal so I had to keep trimming it and fiddling with it to get it to key exactly right. So, and we worked it all the way through the album, and we did that, and we mixed it. Then we mixed it in with the other drums, and it gave it a nice fat sound, which everybody loved. That was fun.
Did it sound different? I guess from the velocity of the machine.
Yes, it could do. That's why it was imperative that we mixed it in with the original snare drum, so the original snare drum kept that velocity right. And so it was a delicate balance. Some songs it was louder than other songs because it worked well. Like maybe something like "Love Bites," which was on that album. It was a much fatter. Actual song, Defenders of the Faith, it was much more prevalent because you could get away with it there, But if the song was fast and with a lot of feel on it, you had to mix it down and just tuck it in so it didn't affect the vibe of the drummer. Which, I learned that was a mistake to do because on the Metal Church album, on the Dark album, I did sample the snare drum and use that. And in retrospect, that was a mistake, because it took away some of the feel of that. I mean, the record did all right. Boys loved it, and I'm still great friends with the boys. But I went on to do another album with them, but I regret having done that because I think that wasn't what was right for that kind of band at all at that time. But again, I was learning.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you won't know till it's done sometimes. Or ever.
Very true. Was
there any latency between when the light went off and the arm came down?
No, it was. If it was the speed of light. I guess it was so. It tripped us all out.
It was fast.
I know that. It was fast, and we used to sit there watching it, and we would just sit. And we would laugh. We would laugh so much watching this fucking metal arm with the glove on it. Because now we would have filmed that now, and it would have been part of everything. We would have been able to show that off to everybody. But Tom was great like that. There's one of the sounds on that album that it goes between. It's Love Bites song, and we've got this effect that goes. And everybody was like, well, what was that? What was that? Basically, there was a hi-hat count going on in that break, and Tom and I, we got a big axe, and then we strapped a microphone on the axe, and we dragged it around the car park, and it made this sound. And I keyed it with the hi-hat. So it went, and that was how we created that sound. People go, wow, how did you do that? It's just one of them things.
Is that something where you guys would say, I want to experiment with something, or it would be more like a light bulb? I just got this crazy idea. Let's try this thing. Spur of the moment.
Yeah, it would start as let's try something, and then it would manifest itself. Sometimes it didn't work, and then sometimes it would work, and then you'd go, wow, that's fucking great. Or sometimes you go, oh, it doesn't work, forget it, move on, let's try something else. But just because you knew that part of the song might need something to give it a little spark,
So you're already open to seeing what the possibilities are?
Absolutely, 100%, always.
Do you think that there's any point in a production or just making music in general where maybe it's wasting time to experiment? Like, where do you draw the line between this experimentation is the right thing versus we're just fucking around right now?
I think, again,
because I'm sure you've had experiences where it goes nowhere, right?
Oh, absolutely. But where it's not working pretty much straight away. And sometimes it's not until you get to the mix where you've put an idea down that it actually go, well, a minute, let's just see what that did do. And then you go, wow, what about if I just did that to it? That might take it somewhere else. And then and then you find things that can work. I mean, that's one of the things that I like about Logic, is that you've got so many, and I don't use a lot of, there's so many extra plugins that I probably should try that I haven't got round to trying yet. But they're all at the tip of your fingertips to get. You can just try anything, and it takes seconds to try a different guitar sound here or a different guitar sound there. And they've got so many variables of those guitar sounds within it that, I find that can really help. Well, I've never quite understood why some people, by all accounts, they will. And I don't know how they do it. Particularly, I was talking to somebody that was mixing a heavy metal album, a guy here in England. And I don't know who the band was or anything. And he was telling me how he reamped everything. And I was like, so you're telling me that the guy has played this guitar, right? This guitar part, this heavy as all hell. It's going, gong, 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 gong. But when he played it, it went, ding, 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 ding. And he went, yeah. He said, this is the original. I said, well, how did he get any vibe? We're going ding, 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 ding. He said, well, he just played it like that, and I'll make it sound better later. Then he reamps it all, puts it through all this different blah, 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 re-records it back, and it sounds heavy as hell. And I go, oh, well, it's more than one way to skin a cat, I guess.
The reamping thing is, I've always had mixed feelings about it, because I've definitely been in scenarios where it saves the day.
Yeah.
The original guitar tone wasn't that good. Like, say you're mixing something that you didn't record and the guitar tone they gave you is not wonderful, but you got a DI. Reamping can make the difference right there. It can totally save your ass. But I've also been in scenarios where, say, I've been the artist and working with a producer. I've experienced this, where the producer is really into guitar tones, and we're going on a hunt together. And 10 days later, we've got a tone, and it's phenomenal. Like a hunt, like trying out like a combination of like 15 guitars with 15 amps with like 5 cabs for like 10 days. And that's that sort of thing. And you arrive at a tone, and the whole time they know in their head they're going to reamp it later. So it makes me wonder, why did we sit there? Like, why did we do this? It never computed to me what the point was of going through all that trouble if you're just going to change it later. And then I've always felt like reamping, it takes away a few percentage of awesomeness from the signal.
Absolutely. Yep.
However, it's a great fail-safe. It's like a good parachute for when there's a bad job done.
Yeah, and sadly, that I appreciate what you're saying And I think that makes total sense. And I expect there are occasions when people spend 10 days and they realise that the sound they had at the beginning was better than all of them.
Yeah, you're right about that. The scenario I'm thinking of right now, we got the sound within the first day.
Yeah.
And then he wasn't cool with it. So we went, and then the sound that we got 10 days later still wasn't as cool as the sound that happened on the first day, but no one knew how to get that sound back.
See, I find that, I mean, I knew of a band in this country, they were called Little Angels, and they had a guitar sound on something, and they wanted to get it back. It became a story. They rented a particular car, to put the amplifier in, and they spent like days putting this amplifier in a car outside the studio with all the leads, micing it all up, and that was how. And they got this sound back. And I'm like, do you really think that anybody gives a fuck? You know, if you played it good, it would make a lot more difference. So a lot of times you have scratch guitars, and you might go, let's just use a scratch guitar here, and we might keep it, we may not keep it. Quite often, the scratch guitar, the vibe on it and the feel on it was so superior to when you might have gone back and tried to get a nice fat, heavy sound, that you'd still keep that rough guitar sound and mix it in with it as well to give it that extra je ne sais quoi. So, again, there's no hard and fast rules to any of this, I don't think. But I do wonder how, if you're meant to be playing, you go, ding, 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 ticky, ticky, tick, tick. It's like, really? Is that not going to have the same vibe, is it, really?
So, I mean, you can use a software simulator, but it doesn't. One thing that I think people forget is that guitar players play to the tone.
Yes.
At least good guitar players do.
Precisely.
Yeah, so even if you're using a great amp sim for getting the chug tone, it's still not going to react the same way as a different amp would. So you're going to play it differently. I've thought, again, no hard and fast rules, but I really think that reamping is best for saving a bad situation. Like it's a good backup, but I've never heard a reamp be better than a great miking job that's done right then and there. I have heard it be better than a bad miking job, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that would work. Yeah. Again, it's when you get to the mix, then everything can change at the mix moment. But invariably, if you've got good rhythm guitar sounds, that's a great start. You know that they're good rhythm sounds. So you don't even have to EQ them. You just put them up, and there they are. And you go, that's great. That's a good place to be. It's like I listened to your podcast with Bobby Clearmountain.
Well, that's a good one.
He sounds like a fantastic guy. He sounds like, he knows his shit for a start. And he's about the same age as me, and he started about the same time as me. And he knows his shit, and everything he says is pretty much spot on. Everything he says is pretty much spot on. But you know that if I was to send him something to mix, I know he would just balance it, because he brings out what has happened within the band. That's his job. He brings out what's already there. It's just the way that he balances it that makes it sound great. He's just enhancing them by being great at balancing. And he is great at balancing. And I just love his modesty, and he seems to be a very calm individual. Seems to be very happy, actually. He comes across as being quite content. I should imagine you would be.
I was going to say, one thing that I think you guys share in common, and I've noticed this also from a lot of people who have stuck around, is that they have an enthusiasm for it that never dies, where you see it sometimes with people as early as 10 years in, they'll start to burn out. And it doesn't mean that they're going to quit, but they might stagnate and just, for instance, stay at the local level forever, or stay at a baby band level forever, or do okay in one niche, but never, ever, ever expand from there. And what I've noticed is people who have an exciting, long career tend to always be enthusiastic about it somehow.
Yeah, and even when there's times when it's not going as well as you'd like it to go, you still go back to the things that made you feel great to keep you confident and happy about it. And you have to work with, you have to work with good people. That the bottom line is you can't. A friend of mine once said, and it's a great saying, and I still use it to this day, you can't soar with the eagles if you work with turkeys. And it's so true.
That's a good way to put it.
But it's so true, you know, and I've been very, very lucky to work with some fantastic people that, you know, so it's made my life easier and made my job easier. But that just makes you have to be good at what you do as well, because there's always someone's waiting to take your place, like you so rightly said earlier.
So that brings up a question. How have you dealt with harder times? Like, how have you kept because obviously this is an up and down sort of business. I mean, I guess any business would be up and down, but especially this one.
Yeah, well, totally this one. I mean, it's definitely a case of feast or famine. And there have been times where, you know, there's no one's banging on my door to ask me to do this or to ask me to do that. And when you're a man that's got a wife and got kids, you got to put bread on the table, and it becomes part of your life to have to do that. And what I created a business that sustained us and kept us alive, you know, and it wasn't a business that I enjoyed in any way, shape or form. The only thing I enjoyed about it was being successful at it. And basically, it was an online business that sold office supplies. And I thought, this is the shittest thing I could ever do in my whole life. And I hated it. But I thought, if I'm going to do this, I better be fucking good at it. So I built a website, which was one challenge, which I did.
When was this?
Oh, God. I started it about 20 years ago.
Okay.
Just started. So it's been on and off. So I started it. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, I better be fucking good at it. And then as I started it, I mean, it was harsh because I was literally walking the streets, banging on people's doors to get work. You know, it was horrible business as well. It's like, really? It's not that exciting. It's not sexy at all.
Compared to working with Judas Priest.
Well, yeah, exactly. And funnily enough, I remember Glenn ringing me one day when I was putting shit in boxes. I was loading boxes up, and Glenn rang me and from Priest, and we were chatting, and he said to me, and I always remember people that make statements that make you go, and he said, how you doing anyway? I said, I'd be all right if I wasn't putting shit in boxes. And he said, it puts food on the table, doesn't it? And I was like, yeah. He said, well, there you go, Mark, get on with it. And funnily enough, I remember Ken Laguna saying to me, Ken Laguna said to me, before he was producing records, he's like, I used to load boxes. That's what I had to do. I had to load boxes to put food on the table. Now I'm a producer. Now I'm going, fuck me, I was a producer. Now I'm loading boxes. I've gone around the wrong way. I've done it all wrong here. But doing it, I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I better be good at it. So I went at it, and I got customers like Google and Facebook and Expedia, and I got big customers, you know. And so that vindicated or made me feel not quite as bad about it. And, you know, I turned it into £1 million business. So it put food on the table. I was employing people. And then a few years ago, I amalgamated it with another company. And then literally, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, I terminated the whole thing and said, right, I've had enough of this. I don't know. Because I'm doing other music stuff now as well, and always have done. Bits here and bits there, you know, albeit that it doesn't pay like it used to. It doesn't matter. It just makes me feel so much more alive and so much more of a person, and makes me feel like my children will respect me more, I think, if I'm doing something like that rather than a stupid... I'm not saying it's stupid, because it did put food on the table, you know, and I have to be grateful for that. But it wasn't the best time of my life. I didn't have a great time doing it, you know. It was difficult, and everybody has hard times in their lives, you know. And so I think that's a measure of how you come through it, you know. And I was my wife had an accident 3 years ago where she got hit by a car and suffered brain damage, but thank God she's alive today, and she's getting better and doing really well. But again, that's a huge strain on a family when you've got a 14-year-old boy, well, he's 17 now, when he was 14 when it happened. And Tommy was like, oh my God, you know, I don't know how I'm supposed to deal with this. And Molly, my daughter, and my older daughter, all these people all came into the equation, and all these other people, friends from this area, that area, all came together and helped us all through that period. And now we're coming out the other side of it, you know, and life's like that, though, isn't it? And it's like, you got to keep punching. I went to, about 20 years ago, I went to Czechoslovakia or wherever it was, where there was the war just out in Macedonia. There was a war, and I went there to deliver goods in a convoy. And I met a guy called George on this trip. And George works in charity, and he's built a big centre in Chernobyl, or just outside Chernobyl in Chernigov, for kids that have all been affected by what happened to them in Chernobyl. I mean, there's the fallout from that is ridiculous. And I went with George to there and saw all these poor kids and one thing and another. And George is like a hero to me. And whenever I speak to George, he just says to me, "Keep punching, Mark, keep punching." And that's, and I always think that, keep punching. You've got to keep punching. You can never stop.
Is that the mentality that you kept while the shit was going down?
Yeah, I had to keep punching, always. Always keep punching and be there for your kids, and be there for everybody around them. And don't, it's hard because a lot of things it's hard not to let anybody see all that. You've got to I always remember my old man, he always seemed to keep everything together. Nothing seemed to faze him. Mm-hmm. And I always thought that was fucking good that he managed to do that because he had hard times too. So I try to, but I want my kids to see me being, because like you so rightly said, when I'm talking about music and all the things that I've done in music, when I went down the pub the other day, I was chatting to some people about some of the stuff that I'd done, and I could feel myself become this different person, this elated, joyful, happy, grateful person that's just like got so much more to give to people. So it's imperative that I surround myself with that music. And I've got a few little acts now that I've found. I've got a little girl singer that Robert Trujillo really loves as well. I've got this kid, she's a fantastic little singer. And I'm now starting to say, right, how can I make that work? How can I make that work? And how can I... So, I've got a lot of different things going on in my head like that. And as I said to you, I've got the thing with Benji that I'm talking about doing as well from Skin Trade, which would be great. And the other thing is I'm now going to start being much more active about working with bands and saying, no, click.
Like I said before, I really do think that bands are much more receptive to that now than they were even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, the no-click thing is spreading. By the way, on the topic of Chernobyl, interesting that you bring that up. That's kind of a near and dear topic to my heart because my family was in Poland when that happened. My dad was doing some concerts, and we just happened to be there. Family trip to beautiful Poland, and yeah, so the Chernobyl exploded, and even though it didn't happen in Poland, I mean, it's basically right next door. So the whole country got shut down. Airports were shut down. The food supply got interrupted, so we couldn't order food. We couldn't eat anything. Suddenly there was military everywhere. We got shipped on a train, which is kind of weird for a Jewish family in Poland. Basically getting put on a train, like a World War II era train by armed guards. But it was, I'm talking about something that happened when I was really young, so I don't remember it super clearly. I just remember we couldn't eat any food. There was a lot of military. It was super scary. We got shuttled around. And then I remember the last time when we were finally leaving, that the airplane had a military convoy leading to it and then armed guards on it. I guess it was a fucked up time period. But I got radiation testing for the next several years after that.
Did you?
Yeah, I don't glow yet, so I think I'm all right. I think
you'll be all right by now. Yeah. It was. I was totally astounded by the impact it had on Chernigov, which was a town probably 20 miles from Chernobyl. It was, and what George and his wife did for those people and the children there is nothing short of phenomenal. I call him St. George because he's such an incredible bloke. He's like 85 and he's still going there looking after these people. But when I saw some of the effects on the people that they're the children and the way that it just leaves you.
It's crazy.
It just humbles you, beyond.
Yeah, we weren't even there. We were hundreds of miles away, and it was still serious. So I can only imagine what it was like for people who were closer. I know that, for instance, my parents didn't let me get X-rays at the doctor for forever. It wasn't until I was an adult that I finally was like, I'll take the risk. Let's take an X-ray. Kind of want to know if there's anything wrong with me.
Yeah, definitely. Might as well find out. But it's funny, isn't it? How life does all those things to you, and they all impact you. I think you have to have that kind of rounded experiences of life, where some people have it early in their days, some people middle, some people have it at the end of their lives. I speak to Glenn Tipton now, and I don't know, everybody knows that Glenn's got Parkinson's disease, and he suffers from it, and then he fell over and broke his foot, and then he done something to his back, then he got run over. I mean, this bloke has been, I said, if you didn't have bad luck, you wouldn't have no luck at all. Which, and he's like, yeah, I know. He says, but I'm lucky, aren't I? And I was like, you're lucky. And he goes, yeah. He says, I've got my grandchildren. He says, I've got my friends and my wife, and I've got this and that. And he says, I'm a lucky guy. I'm a lucky Jim, he says. And I say, man, you fucking blow me away. You're a man and a half. I love you.
Did he always have that kind of attitude?
Yeah. He's always been an exceptional person in so many ways.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. Is that pretty common among those historical bands, that they're kind of filled with historical people? Or do you find that it's that sometimes it doesn't matter? Like sometimes the people, you said earlier that you feel like the personality sometimes matches the music.
Yeah. Well, I think it does. I think that I've probably been really fortunate, Ireland, in as much as I've rubbed shoulders with so many people that are of that ilk, that are that special, like the Whit Cranes of this world. Whit's a terminal, he's a terminal, I was going to say tramp, but he's a vagabond. He looks like a tramp. But, what a unique person, that he is, so unique and so special, that I've been privileged for him to be one of my best friends for so long, from so long ago, and I introduced him to Rob Halford, and Rob came and sang on their record, and Glenn Tipton, and we've all, everybody knows everybody, and Rob Trujillo and Whit are great friends as well. And all of those people are all great. We could all be in a room together and we would all have probably the best time ever, because we'd all get on so well. I just happen to get on with all these people great because I like them. There's a lot of people, like we said earlier, that I probably wouldn't get on with quite so well. But yeah, I think that's true. They're so unique, these people. Tommy Lee, a unique dude, but a great character, someone you'd like to go out to dinner with and hang out with and have go and play golf with or whatever like that. It's people like that. Just Mike Muir's a great example of a person like that I've, forever hold in high esteem. So yeah, I'm a lucky boy from that point of view.
Yeah, man, I've noticed the same thing from the people I grew up around or people I've worked with, that the more interesting their output is, the more interesting they are as people. And it's actually pretty rare, in my experience, to meet somebody who's an incredible artist or something, or an incredible entrepreneur, something like that requires super high level creativity and uniqueness. It's rare for them to do something great and then be kind of boring, unmemorable people.
Yeah, it would be disappointing, wouldn't it? I think.
Yeah, it's rarely ever happened. It's the exception. Well, anyways, Mark, I think this is a good place to stop it. Okay. It's been a pleasure meeting you and talking to you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you too, Al. I don't really know your history very much, but I would like to know it.
I'll give you the shortened version. Come from a musical family. Dad's a conductor, was in a band that got signed to Roadrunner for 3 albums, Roadrunner and Century Media. We did a death metal band. We toured the world a bunch, did that whole thing.
What was the band name?
It was called Doth. Probably never heard of it. So did that, then also have produced a bunch and engineered and some decently known metal bands. And then about 5 years ago, started URM, which the online school. And here we are. The podcast has been going in parallel to it.
Yeah, and you're enjoying every minute of it, I should imagine.
Interestingly enough, I never thought I would, but I kind of like doing this better than I enjoyed doing the band or production, which
Wow.
I never would have thought back when, when I was doing guitar as my main thing. If you had told me that this is what would happen, I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah. Well, it's great that it has, isn't it? I bet
Absolutely.
You must be so happy that it's worked out like this.
It suits me way better. There were lots of issues I had with doing a band professionally, or there's reasons for why production or mixing isn't. It's not that I dislike it or have any problem with it, but there's intricacies of doing that for a living that aren't right for me because of my personality type, I think. And however, my expertise is in music. So it was kind of weird to work so long at something and then realize I didn't really want to do the thing I had worked for. And then when I figured this out, it kind of satisfied it all, because I've been able to use all the expertise I built up over the years, all the connections I built up over the years, like everything kind of came together. It was like a perfect storm. So yeah, I'm very happy this worked out.
And also what you're doing, it hopefully it helps everybody that aspires to be doing what the likes of Bobby Clearmountain and yourself and I do. It gives them some kind of insight to it, and maybe confirm some of their thoughts and their beliefs that help them move forward and be better at what they do.
Absolutely. Well, so since I came up in the classical world, my experience is that art is something that's formally taught and passed on. And it doesn't mean that artists can be formally created, but at least the disciplines are passed on in a way that's recorded into history. But this genre of music that we're in, I wasn't there at the beginning of it, but I got in the 90s, and what I noticed was that nobody was really passing it on to anybody, except for in very, very limited capacity, like an intern learning from somebody great, which is cool. But I felt like in some ways it was going to me, if I played it out over decades in my head, that was going to hurt the genre overall.
Absolutely.
Whereas every other genre on earth, you can study formally. There's a way for them to pass that knowledge down. There was zero for rock and metal. So my hope was that we could do our part to create that, which is kind of weird because rock and metal is supposed to be non-formal and rebellious and all that stuff at its core. But at the end of the day, technique is technique, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And be able to capture that technique is exactly that as well. And equally, the kids of today, and again, no disrespect, that they go and I say to them, "What are you studying?" They go, "I'm studying record production." And I go, "Well, how do you study record production? How do you do that?" They're doing it at university, and they say, "I'm going to go and record." One of the kids said to me, "I've got to go and record a snare drum for part of my lesson." He said, "But I don't know how to do it." And I was like, "Well,
I'm not surprised.
You're in trouble right at the beginning." But there you go. But
we, just so you know, one comment that we get all the time at URM is, "Wow, I learned more in 2 months with you guys than 4 years at this huge audio university." And the thing that we do that's super important, I think key, my experience is that the only way that I got better was when someone who did it in real life, who was really good, showed me. That's how people get better. And I also went to a school. I went to Berkeley, and so I know what it's like to be mentored by somebody great, and I know what it's like to be mentored by somebody that's not great. I know the difference. And so what we try to do is get people who have done it for real to pass it on. It's not just anybody. And that's been very successful for us. And I think it's why our students do well, as opposed to your regular audio university that's not great.
Yeah. Do you have practical workshops for them as well then?
Yes. Obviously, not right now. It started that way. It started as me doing these things in person.
Wow.
So I'd go to a city, I'd find an artist who was well known enough, and we'd take over a studio for like 50 hours and sell like 10 seats. And basically, it's like a paid pseudo internship where we walk through every single step, but like with a real artist as opposed to just some local band. It started like that, and those results are kind of what informed it. And so even if a lot of it can't be done in person, we do everything possible to get people doing things in real life. And then we also do in-person events when possible.
Brilliant. Well, I think it's probably going to be very successful for a long time.
Hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. And it's been delightful chatting to you.
Likewise.
Hopefully we'll meet in person one day.
Yeah, man, before 2027.
Yeah, why before then?
Because quarantine.
Oh, you think it's going to last that long?
No, I'm kidding. I do think it's going to last till middle of 2021.
Yeah, I think it probably will, particularly in America at the moment.
Yeah. Americans going to other countries, I don't foresee it happening till next year. So
I don't either. Scary times, eh?
Yeah, but there have been scarier times.
Yeah, they have indeed. All right. Thank you very much for everything. It's lovely meeting you.
Likewise, man. Have a good one. Okay, then. Another URM podcast episode in the bag. Please remember to share our episodes with your friends, as well as post them to your Facebook, Instagram, or any social media you use. Please tag me at EYAL Levy URM Audio, and of course, please tag my guests as well. Till next time, happy mixing.
You've been listening to the Unstoppable Recording Machine podcast. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit urm.academy and press the podcast link today.